All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Dr. Mindy Pelz is a renowned holistic health and fasting expert. Her popular YouTube videos on fasting and alternative health tips have garnered over 15 million lifetime views. She is the best-selling author of 3 books: The Menopause Reset, The Reset Factor, and The Reset Kitchen. Teaching her signature 5-step approach from her book, The Menopause Reset, Dr. Mindy has empowered hundreds of thousands of people around the world to harness their body's own healing abilities through fasting, diet, detoxing chemicals from the body, stress management, and lifestyle changes as keys to achieving optimal health and slowing down the aging process. This was a really fun conversation, so I'm excited for you guys to get to know Dr. Mindy Pelz. Dr. Mindy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. I'm excited to be here, and always love talking about fasting, nutrition, especially when it relates to women.
Definitely. Well, and there's so much conflicting information out there when it comes to fasting for women. Some sources say it wrecks your hormones, it's horrible for you, you shouldn't do it, it kills your fertility. And other platforms will say, this is the fastest and easiest way to lose weight, keep it off, feel your best, and have energy. So give us the knowledge, give us your expertise. Who's right? What is the research telling us?
Okay. So I would say here's going to be sort of the mind-blowing idea, is that everything you said is accurate. So it is the most amazing way to lose weight. It's also the most amazing way to heal your body on many levels, everything from brain health to your hormones to gut health. And if it's done improperly for women, it can cause problems. And that's really my message, is teaching women, okay, how do you fast? How do you break a fast? How do you time your fast to your cycle? What if you don't have a cycle? What if you're postmenopausal? What if you have PCOS? I mean, these are all the questions that I have been answering for women on my YouTube channel for years that women need to know about. So I'm going to say, to answer your question, is yeah, all of that. And bottom line, women need to fast differently than men.
Oh, well, I love that. And that's what we're going to dive into today. But let's start with the first comment that you made, that fasting is the easiest and fastest way to lose weight. What's the mechanism of action happening there? And then we'll jump into the healing that you talked about, whether it's our brain hormones or gut health.
Yeah, this is such a great question. So here's the most simple way to look at this. We have 2 ways that we burn energy in our body. One is from the foods we eat, And the other is when we are in a fasted state from the food and glucose that we have stored. So we call this sugar burner and fat burner. So let's just address the weight loss for a moment. When you've gone on a diet before, when you've tried to change your nutrition, if all you're doing is manipulating the sugar burner energy system, and that's great. Like if you bring like the ketogenic diet, you bring down your carbohydrate load. What you're doing is you're making yourself a better sugar burner. But the problem is that fasting is really the only way to start to get your body to be a very efficient fat burner. So let's talk about that for a moment. A fat burner is where your body decides, hey, I don't see any food coming in. Glucose is going down. And so I know I stored some sugar before, and I think I stored it in fat. So I'm going to start burning fat to go after the stored glucose, the stored insulin that I stored years ago. So the reason that so many people are losing weight with fasting, and is because they're tapping into this fat burning system, a system they may have never been aware of before. Now, if you pair that with healthy eating and you do what we call metabolic switching, where you're a really good sugar burner part of the day and you're a really good fat burner part of the day, you will be working in alignment with how your body wants you to treat it, and you will drop weight. And people, I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of people across all my platforms. The stories of weight loss is ridiculous. Like 10, 20, 30. I mean, I've got people over 100 pounds they're dropping just by implementing different length fasts into their normal regime.
So important. And I think what we need to state here is that if someone is losing weight, then they've already started to see the benefits in brain health, hormone health, gut health, glucose and insulin markers, A1C, things that really dictate their chances of having chronic lifestyle diseases and real issues down the line. So the weight almost feels like secondary, even though that's what people a lot of times come for, and they're searching for, is to like feel better, feel lighter, have more energy, and they want something changed in their gene size. But it's the other stuff that I really geek out on, because that's how I know when they're 65, 75, when they're a grandma, they can play with their kids. They'll have the energy. Their brain will still be working at that age. And that makes such a huge difference. So I want to talk about something you just mentioned first, though, because we got to go in order. We want to be metabolically switching. You're talking about a sugar burner versus a fat burner. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it. The majority of people fasting or trying to fast or do really low carb or keto, are they metabolically switching, or what is metabolic switching?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm going to say if they are not fasting, all they're doing is working in a low carb state, there's a good chance they are not metabolically switching. So this is why I believe so much in fasting. I really advocate for 6 different length fasts, and we can dive into that if you want. But I do not think you are getting into as deep of a fasted state. You're not accessing that fat burner system as well if all you're doing is going low carb.
I love it. I call it low carb purgatory. I see it all the time. People think they're in ketosis, or they think they're in fat burning, or that they're maybe burning some ketones. But when we really get into it and check breath, blood, or urine, they're not in that state, and they're just exhausted.
Yep. And it's, you watch so many people bang their head against the wall trying to diet and change diets. So they go keto, and then they go paleo, and they just now, plant-based is really popular. And we just hop from diet to diet. And once I understood the science behind fasting, I was like, oh, this is why every diet fails for people, because you can eat the best diet in the world, but if you're not elongating the time in which you go without food, you're missing out on a whole healing mechanism that your body wants to provide for you. One of my favorite studies is where they showed, it was in Cell Metabolism, where they showed if people, it was mice, so we're translating it to humans here, but if they compressed the eating window of these mice,
Mice. Yeah, whatever.
Of these mice that you would be, these mice, if they were fed a high fat, high sugar diet, but they ate that diet within a 10-hour eating window, that they were immune from the metabolic changes and damage that happens from a high fat, high sugar diet. So that's amazing. Like that means that if we just take an eating window and compress it and we elongate a fasting window on most days, and we can talk about how women need to vary it, we are going to be able to make a deeper change in our metabolic state, regardless of what food we're eating.
Oh, so important to mention too. Cell and Metabolism is a very reputable journal. Yeah. And when you look at a 10-hour window, this isn't, I think people have this knee-jerk reaction that if I'm fasting, I'm only eating 4 hours. And maybe they do that occasionally, but I'd love to go through your 6 different types of fasts and how switching it up can be really supportive to healing. And I want to dive deeper into what's healing in the body, brain, hormones, gut health, glucose numbers, all of that.
Yeah. Okay, great. So the first thing, I want to actually go back to something you said earlier that I think is really important, and then I'll go into the science behind these 6 fasts. So the first is that when we start packing on more weight, one of the things that we do is we villainize it. We go, okay, that I hate it. My jeans are too tight. I can't fit in my belt. I'm going to have to go up a notch on my belt. We have all this negative energy around it. But when you truly dive in and understand what the body's doing, the fat that you are storing is there to save your life. And so it is being stored around your waist, the back of your arms, all the places we hate. But really, the only other option to store this extra sugar, these extra hormones, these extra toxins would be your internal organs. And in that scenario, you're now setting yourself up for more disease. So the first thing I always tell people is just look at yourself, appreciate the miracle that your body is, and now let's figure out a good fasting regime for you. And this is how it works, is intermittent fasting. To me, I know there's a lot of different levels of hours that we talk about with intermittent fasting. But when I say intermittent fasting, I mean 13 to 15 hours without food. What happens at that point is several things. One, your body will make that switch over to fat burner. That's enough time to let that glucose come down. It'll switch over to fat burner and it'll start making ketones by burning your fat, which is great. You feel mentally clear. The hunger might go away. So 13 to 15 hours is that magic time. We also see inflammation markers come down. And we see that people start to make more growth hormone. Growth hormone is really important, especially over 30. You're not getting as much growth hormone. So growth hormone slows the aging process down and helps us burn more fat. So if that's all you want, 13 to 15 hours every day is pretty doable for most people. Then the next level is around 17 hours. I look at this as like a dimmer switch. So this is where autophagy starts to kick in. And it's not full autophagy. It's like the body goes, hey, guess what? The blood sugar is still going down. We're not seeing an influx of food. We better become more efficient. And so this intelligence inside your cells starts to repair the cell. So you can kill viruses, you can kill bacteria, you can push out any candida pathogens that might be in the cell. The cell will start to kill those. The cell also will make the mitochondria stronger. It will clean up the nucleus and the endoplasmic reticulum in the cell. It makes that cell stronger at 17 hours. It also will look around the cell and go, gosh, the cell's going to go rogue. So I better kill the cell. And that's called apoptosis. And that's where you see some of the literature around autophagy and people using it for cancer prevention or overcoming cancer. Then when you hit 24 hours, the research is showing us that the gut microbiome gets fully reset. You get stem cells that are secreted in the intestinal mucosal lining. So anybody with SIBO, candida, leaky gut, you throw a couple 24-hour fasts in there, you start repairing the gut. 36 hours, research is showing us that now you're really deep into a fat burning place. So if you are somebody who's just struggling with weight loss, maybe you've been doing intermittent fasting, but you're just not getting that result, learning how to train your body to go into a 36-hour fast, throwing that in once a quarter could be really powerful. 48 hours is where this one's actually one of my favorite. The research is showing us that dopamine pathways will start to improve, and it improves in a couple of different ways. You actually will create more dopamine receptor sites. So you're going to, once you bring food back in, you're going to enjoy your food a lot more. You'll enjoy life a lot more. So people with depression, we really work to train them to get to 48 hours. We're also seeing evidence of anti-aging markers that will show up at 48 hours. And then the last one is the Mac Daddy of all fasts. It's the 72-hour water fast. And this one was really made popular by Walter Longo, who showed that 72 hours is where you start to see white blood cells and the immune system reboot itself. And you get a big surge of stem cells. We've seen in my community, people heal musculoskeletal injuries. I mean, really a lot of magic happens when you get to that 3-day.
I love that you mentioned Dr. Longo's work. That is, I would say he's the godfather in long fasting. And I remember looking at that research, back in, I think it was like 2017 or 2018, I've taken clients away to do a 72-hour water fast for this benefit. Very strategically though. It's like they need to be dipping into ketones, be fat adapted before we go do something like this. And so what I heard you say is you need to, at the 36-hour mark, you said you need to train your body to do a 36-hour fast. Yes. Let's talk about, because I'm sure everyone's overwhelmed, like, wait, I'm not going to eat for 3 days or 4 days. Like, not going to happen. This is ridiculous. I'm turning this podcast off, but it is a strike mission. It is strategic. Like when I think about a 72-hour fast, I know some people get really excited and they do it more than once a year. But for me, that's like, hey, you're going to get your teeth cleaned. You're going to see your OBGYN. Yes. You're going to do a 72-hour fast. Like it is part of your health prevention, and the research is just so robust that it gets me really excited. But I also don't want people to go, oh, now Kelly's promoting not eating, because that's not my brand. And it's not who I am. It's not how I work with clients, but it is we have to be very strategic in how we do this. So let's talk about what the 13 to 15 hour window, 17, 24, 36, 48, and 72 all look like. How often would someone incorporate that? And how do we train our body to get there?
Yeah. Such a good question. So here's what I always say is the first step to fasting is making sure that you are following 3 key nutritional principles. One, you got to make sure that you are eating the good oils, not the bad oils. So there's a lot, hopefully the message is getting out that the bad oils like canola oil, cottonseed oil, corn oil, these inflammatory oils are making us insulin resistant. So start by switching your oils out. So at least you've taken that major toxic influx out of your diet. Second thing is I really encourage people to switch from more processed carbohydrates to nature's carbs. So maybe for a week, you, instead of doing the breads, the pastas, the cakes, the cookies, even if they're gluten-free, you switch to more fruits, vegetables, potatoes, squashes, and you lean into more of nature's carbs. And then the third food switch that I recommend people do before they start fasting is really get out the toxic ingredients. So these are your artificial flavorings, your nitrites, your red dyes, anything you look at on a label. I heard this the other day. Somebody said, if you can't sing if you can't use those ingredients in a song, they're probably synthetic. I thought that was really good.
That is pretty good.
Right? I'm like, that's really good. So you change those 3 things first. And you might only have to change it for a week. You might not have to do it very long. Then the next step is you're going to start pushing your breakfast back an hour. Now, the other thing you could do is you could push your dinner up an hour, but most people start with, okay, I eat breakfast at 8 o'clock. I'm going to eat it at 9 o'clock. Now, here's the interesting thing that I really want people to understand is that you actually want that stretching, that pushing your breakfast back to be a little difficult. And here's why. Our body adapts when we give it what we call a hormetic stress, which is a good stress that just makes the body a little uncomfortable so it can grow itself stronger. So if you push your breakfast back an hour and you're like, that was nothing, then the next day I want you to push it back 2 hours. And if you're like, okay, that's still pretty easy, push it back 3 the next day. But if you push your breakfast back an hour and you're like, oh my gosh, I heard that podcast with that crazy lady talking about fasting. Why did I listen to her? And you're like really agitated with that extra hour delaying your food. Just stay there. Just stay there. Do that a couple of days till it gets easy. So I call it backing in, where you're just slowly compressing your eating window and elongating your fasting window.
Oh, I love it. Nature's ditching the omega-6 oils, all those seed oils, super inflammatory, causes insulin resistance, going back to nature's carbs. I love that you mentioned the gluten-free thing. I think people immediately, it's like marketing. It's like back in the low-fat days. They're like, I'm grabbing the low-fat thing, the Snackwell cookies. Now it's like, I'm grabbing the gluten-free thing. And I sometimes turn these things around and I see, rice flour, 36 grams of carbohydrates, 4 crackers, and they're eating the whole box. And I'm like, this is wrecking your blood sugar, creating major inflammation in your body. And then what I think you really hit the nail on the head is you're giving your body the chance to heal by pushing breakfast back. I don't think people realize, I think they think they need to fuel every activity, but it's just our body's going to use resources to metabolize that food and bring our blood sugar down and focus on dealing with the inputs. But if there aren't inputs, it's freeing up all this energy, space, and time to say, like, what can I do? So can we sort of jump into what these things do? I want to stay on track. Let's stick with the 6 fasts and how people can get there. Then we'll go back to what this free time is, what's happening in our body when we give it free time.
Yeah. Here's one thing. Let's just sort of put this in context, because if this is the first time you've learned or hearing about fasting, I agree with you, Kelly. Like, there are moments where people go, this sounds crazy. But then you watch people succeed at fasting of all different backgrounds, men, women, busy people, people that are at home near the refrigerator all day. So people with money, people without money. This is what I love about fasting, is anybody can train their body to do it. So what you have to realize is you have this primal design, and your body is the same body that the cave people lived in. So even though we have all this modern technology, what you're living in every single day is quite ancestral. It has a need to survive. So if we go back to the cavewoman day, what happened is the cave people came out of the cave. They didn't have a refrigerator. They didn't have a pantry. They definitely didn't have DoorDash. So they had to go hunt for food. So the body has these healing mechanisms that kick in the longer you go without food, because your body needed to go find food. So your brain gets sharper, like ketones, for example. As ketones go up, your brain works off of 50% glucose, 50% ketones. So if you're never fasting, or you're just trying to manipulate your blood sugar to get those ketones, you're missing half of the fuel source of the brain. And why is that? Because you had to get smarter. You had to have more laser focus. The other thing we know, the longer you fast, is that as ketones go up, that you're going to get more energy, and the hunger hormone in your brain is actually going to turn off. And why is that? Because you, as a primal cave person, had to go find food. So when we look at these 6 different fasts, these are really timed nicely with what we had to do centuries ago in order to stay alive. So I think that's the really big part that people need to understand, is even though your intellectual brain, as you're hearing this, may think this is overwhelming, your body knows how to do it. And this is what you just have to trust as you train yourself to fast.
Okay, so let's get training. Someone pushes breakfast back, they get to a 13 or 14-hour fast. And do they do that every day? Do they do it a couple of times a week? And when do they start peppering in the longer fasts?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect question. So here's what I would say is I like people, the first step is just to figure out, can you get to 13 to 15 hours? So you follow the pushing the breakfast back, you get to 13 to 15 hours. And then I would encourage you do that every day for a couple of weeks. You might even do it every day for a month. What most people notice in that first step is they're like, this is incredible. I feel amazing. I'm dropping weight for the first time that I've never been able to drop weight for. So every day you're doing 13 to 15 hours. You're doing that 2 to 4 weeks. Once that becomes easy, now we got to switch it a little bit. So I recommend that people, the next step is what I call a 5-1-1. 5 days a week, you're going to do 13. 13 is just great. If you want to go 15, you go 15 hours of fasting. 1 day a week, you are going to actually push that fast. So ideally, we want to get you to that 24-hour mark where you're eating maybe one meal a day, but at least maybe go to 17 hours so you're getting some stimulation of autophagy. And you're just elongating the fast 1 day a week. And then here's the really fun part. 1 day a week, you're not going to fast. Now, this is what we call fasting variation. And the idea behind it is that you're actually you're simulating what the cave people did. They had days where sometimes food was really accessible. They had days where they had to go longer without food. And then they had times where they were feasting. So this kind of fasting variation is really efficient for most people. If we do the same fast day after day after day, let's say I didn't switch your fast at that one month mark. I didn't have you elongate your fast. I didn't have you do a day without fasting. Eventually you would get stuck. And this is one of the things I realized after Jason Fung's book came out, The Obesity Code. So many people were losing weight. So many people were one meal a day. And they all landed on my YouTube channel saying to me, I'm stuck. It was working great. And now I don't know, it's not working anymore. And it's because the next step is variation and knowing how to vary that. And then to go back to the 6 fasts, and then we can talk a little bit deeper about how women vary it, because that's where the variation is so important for women. But if you want to do the 36-hour fat burner fast, you really need to be pretty comfortable with a 24-hour fast. So that 1 day a week, if you're like, hey, this is getting easier, I can really get to 1 meal a day. The hunger's not there. I like this. You're ready for a 36-hour fast and just push yourself a little bit. And I think, once a quarter is great. I've had people in my community who are really trying to lose weight, and they'll do the 36-hour fast I have seen people do it every week. You can do it every couple of weeks. I think once a quarter is fine. Same thing with a 48-hour fast. Once a quarter is great, just to kind of tune up that dopamine system. The 72-hour fast once a year, to your point, I like it for cleaning out any cancer cells that might be forming. I don't think it's a fast we do often. Once a year is really great.
Awesome. I love that. I just don't want people to tune in and then think I'm supposed to not be eating once a month or something like that for 72 hours. We really, really I love that you said you want to be comfortable with that 24-hour fast before you push to 36. And that's the thing. It's like training in any other thing. You wouldn't tell an athlete to get out on the field for a big game if they hadn't practiced. And so fueling up right, understanding really what's going on in your body on a biological level, I think empowers people to make these changes.
Yep.
So
agreed.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about a little bit deeper about the benefits, other than ketones being fuel for the brain. Can we talk about the hormones piece? Because that's really the pushback for women. And I know you wanted to go deeper into the specific variations for women, and how that might be protective of hormone health.
Yeah. So something that came to my attention about 10 years ago was that we have a hierarchy system to our hormones. And it looks like this. At the bottom of the hierarchy are your sex hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. What will greatly influence these sex hormones is a hormone above that, which is insulin. So let's use PCOS as an example. And we can even use infertility as an example. If you are insulin resistant, there is and actually, let me put it in reverse. Women with PCOS are often insulin resistant. And the reason that insulin resistance leads to PCOS is because it throws testosterone off. So we've got insulin resistance throwing our sex hormones off. Same thing for perimenopausal and menopausal women. As estrogen is declining, progesterone is declining. If you are insulin resistant, you are going to throw those sex hormones into more of a frenzy. And with estrogen for the perimenopausal women, you may be on the high and low more. Progesterone, you're not getting much after 40. It's really on a downward spiral. If you're insulin resistant, you're not going to be getting as much progesterone. And that's a big issue for your emotional health. Now, above insulin is cortisol. Mm-hmm. So this is really important because cortisol, any kind of stress in your life, like if you're under a crisis moment, whether it's a pandemic, the loss of a loved one, extra work, if cortisol is surging through your body, it is really difficult to manage insulin. If you're not managing insulin, well, you're not going to balance your sex hormones. So now here's the great news. At the top of the hierarchy is oxytocin. And oxytocin you can get in hugs, you can get petting your pets, you can get in having a great conversation with a girlfriend. There's so many wonderful ways to get oxytocin. When you have oxytocin, you're going to manage cortisol. When cortisol is managed, you're going to manage insulin. When insulin's managed, you can get to those sex hormones. So that is the basic premise. Now, how do we fit fasting into that? And it really is, we've got to look at the needs of these sex hormones. So let's take a menstruating woman. If you have a normal cycle, what estrogen would tell you if she could talk to you is she would say, I need you to be insulin sensitive. So I need you to keep insulin down, glucose down. This is day 1 to about day 10 of your menstrual cycle. You're going to do great with fasting. You're going to do great with the ketogenic diet. That's when you want to go low carb. That's when you want to be a better fat burner because you will improve estrogen sensitivity, improving insulin sensitivity as well. Now, when we move into ovulation, which is about day 11 to day 15, you've got estrogen at its highest and you've got testosterone at its highest and a little bit of progesterone. Here's what's really interesting about hormones is that just because you make a hormone doesn't mean you're metabolizing that hormone. So in this short little window, I encourage women to, do just intermittent fast. You don't need to go long, just like a 13 to 15 hour fast is great. But this is where you want to lean a little more into your foods. So your gut and your liver are going to break these hormones down. So we want to lean into more of the vegetables, leafy greens, really up your plant diversity. So you're supporting a healthy microbiome. Make sure you're getting off of alcohol during that time because the liver needs to break these hormones down. Then when you come out of that ovulation window, your hormones all dip again. And you have a short little 5-day period where you can go back to fasting a little longer. You can do keto a little more. But then around day 19, your body wants to make progesterone. And this is where I actually encourage women to not fast because as cortisol goes up, progesterone is going to go down. So this is where you would want to step out of fasting. If you love fasting, you might try 11 hours, 12 if that feels good. But now you want to lean into more foods that will actually raise glucose that support progesterone. And these are foods like squashes and potatoes. Even there's some incredible evidence, citrus fruits, tropical fruits, beans, seeds, grass-fed meats are great. All of these will support healthy progesterone production, but you would definitely not want to be going into a longer fast. So for a woman who has a cycle, that's what we teach is how to go in and out of these different variations, matching the hormonal needs of her body within a 28, it's like 24, 34-day cycle. Very few women have a 28-day cycle.
I love that you broke it down by someone's cycle. So looking at day 1 to day 10 to really support those hormones and insulin sensitivity. and you're promoting more fasting. Day 11 to day 15, we're breaking down estrogen by not drinking alcohol, by eating leafy greens. I have to mention cruciferous vegetables because you're talking about estrogen detoxification. And then after ovulation, looking at day 19, not fasting, really like fueling the body with those nature's carbs, as you call them, to support progesterone. I mean, such a beautiful breakdown to layer the menstruation cycle on top of this fasting. I have to mention, I found out I was pregnant with Sebastian because I tested my ketone levels and they were off the charts, actually. So then I took a pregnancy test and knew I was pregnant. But that was something that was really important to me. I think people have this misconception that by going low carb or becoming metabolically flexible or going into ketosis, it will negatively affect your fertility. And in fact, I had a miscarriage first, and then got pregnant with Sebastian, and he's a 3-year-old on Saturday. But
awesome.
looking at that, I wanted the highest quality health for my eggs. I wanted to be really fertile. And what I had seen through infertility clinics that use diet, that they are doing exactly what you're saying. They're increasing insulin sensitivity and allowing for, sex hormones to really have their moment to shine so that we can have that quality egg. So I think there's a real fear around being metabolically flexible during pregnancy. There's recommendations to eat over 100 grams of carbohydrates a day during pregnancy that come from the OBGYN obstetrics community. I mean, it's just so backwards. And so I love to hear you say this because the hormone piece and needing carbohydrates for your hormones, absolutely. On day 19, let's load up when we need to, but there needs to be a conversation around the health and genetic health of our body's ability to have really healthy babies because of this.
Yeah. When I first started to understand the principles of fasting and then really understand the needs of the menstrual cycle and pairing those together, women that are dealing with infertility was one of the things that it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, all these women that are having challenges with fertility, what if we put them through, I call it the fasting cycle, what I just explained to you. What if we put them through the fasting cycle? So I was like, okay, I need some women that are struggling to get pregnant. So we found 5, N of 5. So this is, it's not a big study, but 5 women in my community that were struggling to get pregnant a year or more. I put them through the fasting cycle and all 5 within 30 days got pregnant. And that's all
Beautiful.
They changed.
I mean, I'm a huge proponent of blood sugar balance. But what I think the Fab4 does for some of my clients is exactly that. It allows for really those insulin levels to drop and the sex hormones to have their moment to shine.
Yes.
Like
I love that.
And so you're doing it with fasting. And I think if anyone is listening and on a fertility journey and struggle, I would highly recommend that they try your fasting journey, following the cycle. Mindy, this is such great information for people. And I think no one's talking about it. And yeah, I just really appreciate you and your time here today, because this is going to change people. There are going to be people listening that get pregnant because of it. And I'm so thankful for that.
And you think about how much money people spend trying to get pregnant. And it's this, you can use the same thing with thyroid problems or menopause. Like all these situations we're throwing money, we're throwing medications at, and even what I call the magic mushroom, we're trying to put some magic supplement. But we've got to go back to the foundation. And the foundation is, if you have a cycle, are you eating and fasting for these hormones and their shining moment? I love that, Kelly. I'm going to have to start using that. Yeah. And as women, we've never been taught that. We've never been taught that when hormones come in and out, our lifestyle needs to change. So infertility, menopause symptoms, thyroid problems, PCOS, these are conditions that we can say, I am living, eating out of accordance with how my hormones want to be treated. So let me go back to the basics and let me start working with what my hormones need. And that's where the fasting cycle came out, is I needed to draw something out for my community. It is coming out in a book next year in 2022 so that people will have all the nuance. But I hope, Kelly, that your listeners take it, go back, listen to what I said on the fasting cycle, write it down, try it, message me if you get pregnant, because I then can say I've got N of 10 or however many people we've got. But it's that simple. It's just we're not talking about it.
We aren't. And you mentioned two other states that I think we can't glaze over: thyroid and menopause. I mean, in looking at the research for my pregnancy course and helping women keep their blood sugar down during pregnancy and, gain a healthy weight and get the nutrient density that their baby needs, the research shows us that one of the number one causes of a miscarriage is thyroid health or thyroid problems. Can you explain how our food choices affect our thyroid?
Yeah, absolutely. The first myth that I want to dispel, in case anybody's heard this, is fasting is not good for your thyroid. So let's talk about that. I spend hours every week diving into fasting research, and I spent a lot of time looking at the research on thyroid. Fasting is time restricted eating. It is not calorie restricted eating. So if you have a thyroid issue, what I would encourage you to do is you can still compress your eating window. You can still elongate your fasting window. You can still do the variation of fast that I talked about. But when you eat, you need to eat. You need to not calorie restrict. So that's the first thing for thyroid.
Oh, just like, hallelujah. Like,
right?
Thank you for saying that, because I think they just think, oh, we're just going to eat like one meal and I'm going to have the normal portions that I have, or I'm going to have two meals. And that's when your thyroid takes a hit. That's when you have hair falling out. That's when you have cold fingers. That's like when all the symptoms start to hit, that your thyroid is taking a hit because you're not fueling up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny because I'll go out to dinner with friends and they're like, they know I'm like obsessed with fasting, and they go, God, you eat a lot. I'm like, yeah, I do. I fast a lot. I eat a lot. Like, again, metabolic flexibility. We were meant to feast. We were meant to thrive in a famine state. So when we look at the thyroid, we really have to mind that food heals, and it can be supportive of the thyroid, and fasting heals as well. So we want to combine those both to heal whatever hormonal condition you have. But the thyroid is a big one. The second thing I want to say, because I love science, is the research that I see is that when you go into a fasted state, you can see a decrease in T3. But when you break that fast, they actually see an increase when food is reintroduced in T3. So back to metabolic flexibility. Let's go into a fasted state. Let's stimulate some autophagy. Let's get some inflammation down. Let's get rid of some insulin. And then when we eat, let's lean into our foods like polyphenols and probiotics and prebiotic rich foods and some really great meats. And let's feast. And now we're doing really what the thyroid wants us to do.
Oh, I love that. It really is allowing for people to clear out the system and rebuild it with nutrients. And
that's right.
That's good stuff. So what about in menopause? Because I think, a lot of people will look at the research and they'll say all the fasting research is done on men, and it's done on men, older men in their 40s or 50s. There's no research on women. And I would say the menopausal research on fasting is phenomenal. What would you say?
Yeah, for sure. The research is great. For the studies that we have that are all women, studies around fasting keep proving how great fasting is for women. We just don't have a ton of them. So that's the first thing. And I would also encourage you, in some of the studies, we have men and women. We really need to start separating women out. Now with menopause, here's the challenge. And I'm a 52-year-old woman. I'm in the thick of menopause. And I really want women over 40 that are starting to go into that menopause state. What I want those women to know is as estrogen declines, you become more insulin resistant. So when you're trying to run more, you're trying to work out more at the gym, you're trying to diet more, you're trying to fast more, and you're trying to make a change in your weight, you really have to go back to the principle of, okay, let's just start by intermittent fasting. Let's get you compressing your eating window and fasting 13 to 15 hours. The research there says I can get you your estrogen balanced, and I can get you insulin sensitive again, just from that one change. So all those menopausal symptoms that show up around weight gain can be dramatically improved when we start to do more just intermittent fasting alone. Now, the other piece to the menopausal woman is that she doesn't have progesterone as much, right? So this makes us, I think one of my favorite hormone experts is Dr. Carrie Jones. I love the way she explains hormones. And she put a post out a couple weeks ago saying that progesterone is that hormone that tells you everything's going to be okay. And I laughed because I'm like, yeah, you talk to any menopausal woman and she's going to tell you your brain is often telling you everything's not okay. So in order to mind this declining progesterone, we need 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week for the menopausal woman to not fast. We go into those foods I talked about in the fasting cycle. We go into the root vegetables. We go into the citrus fruits, the tropical fruits, a couple of days a week. That would be amazing. So the variation for the menopausal woman becomes very important. She will thrive with intermittent fasting. She'll thrive with actually any of those 6 fasts. But then she needs to have days where she's not fasting, specifically in a week time if she doesn't have a cycle, so that she mines her progesterone. But we're seeing in our community, women that went into menopause at 45, they start using these principles at 55, and they actually will bleed for a couple of days. They'll get like tender breasts where they come out of menopause, and it's like that final dump of estrogen that needed to happen, and then they go to a whole nother level of health. So you can still use the principles of the fasting variation as you move through menopause, and you'll find it's the best tool you've got.
Just your focus on teaching people variation, I think, is critically important for all ages. Like you just mentioned, all the benefits during menopause. We know the variation for a menstruating woman and also minding their progesterone. But I think about people who overdo it and think, just because one thing is good, or just because like low carb is good, then no carb is best. And they take it to these extremes that then wreck their thyroid, cause elevated chronic elevation in cortisol that, don't allow them to live their most vibrant life. So these layers that you've created on top of traditional fasting with variation, and minding someone's menstruation or someone going through perimenopause, I think really, it strikes a chord with me because you're protecting the thyroid, you're protecting the sex hormones, you're making these transitions that we go through that can be so difficult a lot easier, which is, as women, I'm sure we're all multitasking. We have a lot going on. So like to deal with health issues on top of, regular life is a lot.
It's the classic, you can have your cake and eat it too moment is the way I look at it, because variation, not that I'm advocating for cake eating, but the variation gets really fun once you start to understand it. And I think, especially for like the perimenopausal woman who doesn't quite grasp what's happening to her body, I think it gives you control. It's like, and I'll use myself as an example. When I went through those years where like I would start spotting, and then maybe a week or two would go by before my period actually started, I would feel very, very anxious in that week until my period started. I started to dive in to understand progesterone, and that prior to really fully understanding progesterone, I was doing more fasting, more keto, not realizing that I was tanking my progesterone. So when the spotting showed up, my brain went, okay, stop fasting, no keto. We got to go more into these nature's carbs. And the minute I did that, I stopped spotting. My period came right away. I got my cycle actually at like 45. I thought I was going into menopause. By 47, I was like fully normal cycle again, using these principles and knowing what each hormone is doing at what time of the month, knowing how I need to take care of it. It's just empowering because then you can start to really make changes in your hormonal health through your lifestyle alone.
This is just, how do I share this podcast on more than just my platform?
Right? It's like every woman needs to hear this.
Well, we're just undereducated. And when you look back at sex ed in whatever grade you had it in junior high, everything's flying over everyone's head. No one understands anything about it. And I think critically looking back on our education, we're missing nutrition. We're missing like how to take care of our finances and how to understand our own health, hormones, what's happening in our body, based on, our circadian rhythm, based on our menstruation, whatever it may be. And you're giving people the education that allows them to really understand themselves better and take better care of themselves. So
one thing I just want to comment on that, and I think every woman listening can resonate with this. I don't know about you, Kelly, but when I remember specifically my sex ed class in 9th grade, and it was basically, you started your period, now you could get pregnant. Here's how you don't get pregnant. That was it. One class.
And here's a video of a baby being born.
Right. Right. You don't want that. And so, but that was it. So why are we not like, I had to figure this out at 45 when I was going into menopause. I finally understood food, fasting, what these hormones needed. And from there, I was like, I got to get this to every woman. And it will get in the next book. It's all this stuff will be in there. I do have a menopause book that is out for people, for women going through that. But this needs to be something that every girl, teenager, woman trying to get pregnant, every woman needs to know this information.
They do. They absolutely do. And we're going to help them get it. So you said something earlier in the podcast that I want to circle back to. But before we get there, I have to ask the question, when would fasting be contraindicated?
Good question. Okay. First, we talked a lot about fertility. Once you get pregnant, you stop fasting. You do not fast when you're pregnant. That is not your tool at that time. Now, you can focus on the microbiome because you're going to hand your microbiome down to your child, keep your toxic load down, those kind of things. So there's other things to focus on, but fasting is not your tool. Second thing would be nursing mothers. So you can intermittent fast, which is 13 to 15 hours, but I do not recommend going more than 15 hours. Let me tell you why. When you get to that 17-hour mark, you stimulate autophagy. You also stimulate apoptosis, where the body kills these cells that may be housing toxins. When a cell dies, it's going into the bloodstream. It can get into your breast milk, and now you're putting those toxins into your baby. 15 hours max. We do not go more than that. The third one that shouldn't fast is adrenal fatigue. And now this isn't a shouldn't fast. It just means slowly go into your fasting lifestyle. This is not a time to create huge amounts of hormetic stress. I've done videos on YouTube. You can go find on that. And then the fourth one is eating disorders. I really encourage people, if you have a diagnosed eating disorder, if you're working with a professional with an eating disorder, you really want to work with them and be gentle in how you approach this time-restricted eating. I've seen it totally change people's relationship to food, but I just want to make sure we don't trigger anything for somebody who has a clinical diagnosis of an eating disorder.
I love it. The really important points to make, because I think this can be all really exciting for people to understand and for them to want to try. But there are definitely times when it's not the right time for it. So let's circle back to that really, I think a great way to end the podcast is to circle back to something that you explained earlier. And that was the order in which your hormones take the lead, and sex hormones being at the bottom, then insulin, then cortisol, that stress hormone that you were talking about that may be kind of going crazy if you have adrenal fatigue. And then above it all was oxytocin. Can you talk about how people can get a hit of oxytocin and how you encourage your fasters to lean into non-food related oxytocin?
Yeah. Oh gosh, this is a great conversation. So here's the great thing about oxytocin. As women, we rock oxytocin. We know how to find it. We search for it, whether we're aware of it or not. There are so many different ways you can get oxytocin. And let's start with one of my favorite ways, which is building community with other women, hanging out with other women, laughing, even, listening to podcasts like this where we're feeling connected to a message. We're feeling hopeful. These are, moments where oxytocin will come in. Just in when we have community. So one of the ways that we've done this is we have a free fasting group on Facebook. It's called the Resetter Collaborative. And we fast together once a month for a 5-day period, trying different fasts out. But the purpose during this time is not just to experiment with all this information, but to bring, hundreds of thousands of people worldwide together so that we can build community. And now we're bringing up oxytocin. The other, there's other great ways. I have a whole new appreciation for the animals in my house. When I went through menopause and I had trouble sleeping, I would just put my hand, on my dog and pet my dog. And I just all of a sudden realized oh God, I feel calmer. That's oxytocin. I use oxytocin as a way to get hugs out of my kids. They're now 21 and 19. My 19-year-old son, he'll play the game with me and I'll just say, I just need a hug. I need a little more oxytocin, and he'll happily hug me. And I get a little oxytocin hit there. You can sit on your couch and watch a great Netflix series like Schitt's Creek or, some of these other ones and laugh your head off. Ted Lasso is another good one, and you're laughing and you're feeling good. You're getting oxytocin. So there's so many different ways. And then of course, things like sex, masturbation, all of the sexual connection, that's a huge oxytocin rush. There's just so many different ways to get it. And when you're in a fasted state, if you're struggling, one thing you do is go search for some oxytocin and see if it helps you elongate that fast.
I love it. Get a hug, elongate your fast.
Right? I love it. I was on a webinar with Dr. Zach Bush recently, and he said that it was like something like 8 hugs a day improves your immune system by 35%. And I was like, another example of why hugging rocks, and we need to all hug each other.
Seriously, I am all for it. Let's get back to hugging.
Yes, agreed. Agreed.
Oh my goodness. Dr. Mindy, this has been such an amazing episode. I'm so excited to share it on the Be Well by Kelly podcast. I'll round up the notes, but where can people find you if they're tuning in and they want to go follow right now?
Yeah, I always say my passion project, if you want to see what I absolutely love doing, it's putting together my YouTube channel and YouTube videos out. We've got over 600 videos out there. And so if you want to know all the ins and outs of fasting, that's a great resource. If you want to fast with us, you can go to my Facebook group. It's called the Resetter Collaborative, and you'll find a community of really positive fasters. I actually have 2 to 3 moderators on there every day, making sure that it's only positive, encouraging information. So you'll find some really good resources there. Instagram is kind of my day-to-day. I'll show you what I'm breaking my fast with. I'll show you some current science, keep you motivated. And if you forget all that, you can go to drmindypelz.com. I've got a ton of information there. And for the menopausal women, I've got a book called The Menopause Reset that's out that teaches a lot of what I just said.
I love it. And if you guys are just listening and you're not going to head to the show notes, Mindy's last name is spelled Pelz. Oh, Dr. Mindy, this was so much fun and so inspiring and educational. And I feel like I got a hit of oxytocin from it. Yay! So thank you for your time today and for really breaking down the science behind fasting for women.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kelly. And my real mission is to get this information into women's hands, and you're doing an incredible job changing women's health. So I just appreciate the opportunity. and just hope people grab this information and try it out because it's so impactful. So thank you.
Yeah, so fun.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.